Good afternoon. Welcome to L'Dor Va-Dor's presentation today. We thank Geoff Kashdan for presenting this wonderful and bringing this program to L'Dor Va-Dor and offering this to our congregants and community. And without any further delay, I'd like to turn it over to Geoff. I'd just like to let you all know it is being recorded. Your pictures will not be on the recording. But if you have any questions for Geoff or I during the presentation, if you could just enter them in the chat window, which is across the bottom of your screen. And after his presentation, we'll put it in gallery mode and let everybody ask questions live. Right now you're muted and we'll be unmuting you at the end, okay? So thank you all and sit back and relax, and Geoff, take it away. Thank you very much.
Greetings, it's great to be with you all again this afternoon. I bumped into the whole idea of swarm intelligence in a National Geographic. It blew my mind, and when I saw it, I wanted to do a PowerPoint presentation. The mathematics was so daunting, and the topic was so complex that it took me 2 years to figure out how to put it into usable language. And this PowerPoint is the result of that 2 years struggle. All sorts of animals swarm, and in the swarm, individuals acting together create what all appearances seems to be a swarm intelligence. Scientists have studied animal swarms in water, land, and air, and created a new science, swarm theory. This presentation will be an exploration of swarm theory, animal swarms, and then applications to computer technology. I suspect this all sounds very weird, and that's because it is very weird. So hold on to your seats for a head-spinning journey into the science of biological and computer-based swarm intelligence. The first 6 slides will be text, setting the stage for the next 80 or so slides of amazing examples of animal and artificial swarms. The information at first will be very confusing, but during the rest of the presentation, it'll begin to make sense. So swarm intelligence defined. Swarm intelligence is the discipline that deals with natural or biological and artificial computer-based systems composed of many individuals, which is the swarm of animals, cells, or robots that coordinate using decentralized control and self-organization. The swarm itself gains the appearance of intelligence resulting from the combined actions of masses of individuals. Using rules of self-organization, unintelligent individuals achieve impressive intelligence, but only when operating within a swarm. The collective, which is the swarm, is analogous to the complex brain, while the individuals within the swarm are analogous to the individual neurons in the brain.
Geoff, do you want to share your screen?
Do I want to do what?
You got to share your screen so we can see the presentation.
I thought I did that.
No, you didn't. You got to do it right now.
Oh. So, got to go back and, so you don't see my presentation at all?
No.
So let me minimize it. Oh, here we are again. Okay, share screen. How about now?
Now, yes, and then click on from beginning. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so.
Thank you, Geoff.
So here are the properties of swarm intelligence. A swarm consists of many similar individuals, although some animal swarms consist of 2 or more species operating as one swarm. The interactions of the individuals are based upon simple rules, also known as algorithms. When we say rules, don't think of rules that people create. These so-called rules are really conclusions of how individuals swarm act. The rules are really mathematical algorithms, but it's so much easier to understand it when we use the word rules. The algorithms exploit only local information, the behavior of neighboring individuals. This will begin to make more sense in a few minutes. The overall behavior of the swarm results only from the interactions of individuals with each other, but without any awareness of potential outcomes. The individuals do not exhibit what we would call intelligent behavior, but the swarm does. There is no planning for the creations of a swarm intelligence, such as the beehive or the mound construction of termites. There's simply no planning. It just happens. Individuals efficiently collaborate, even while lacking awareness of what the others or having of individual awareness of others or having any memory or intelligence. In simple language, a swarm achieves the outcome without a leader, a plan, or the knowledge of any individual swarm as to what the hell they're going to accomplish by their efforts. And all of this happens when individuals in the swarm pay attention owing to a very small number of their pals, which are very close to them. A brain is a collective collaboration of billions of neurons. So a human brain acts like a swarm, combining the information from various neurons. A swarm is the collective collaboration of thousands or millions of brains. A swarm is a form of superintelligence. So here are some examples of swarm intelligence. I put natural swarms and artificial swarms so you can see how they compare. So colonies of ants and termites and mini robot systems. Schools of fish on natural swarms and certain computer programs. Flocks of birds, autonomous vehicles. So you can hear a lot about self-driving vehicles. They use a lot of the information from the study of ant and bee optimizations. Bacterial growth and search and rescue bots are artificial swarms. Herds of land animals, ant optimized factory systems. Neurons in the human brain, voting. Emergence. The actions of the individuals in a swarm result in a complex behaviors or a product that is not apparent to any of the individuals in the swarm or even of an observer of the individuals in the swarm. The product, be it a hive, a mound, or a swarm defensive strategies, emerge from the undirected actions of masses of individuals responding only to what nearby individuals are doing. So here are some models of swarm organization. This is of fish models, and there's a metric distance model and a topographic. There are three organizing principles in swarms, animal swarms. Separation, which is steered to avoid crowding or collisions. So when all those birds and all those fish move, the first is separation. They have to avoid colliding with each other. Alignment, steered to the average heading of a local flock mates. And cohesion, steered to move the average position of a local flock mates. Two models of self-organization are shown in the diagram. In the metric distance model on the left, the focal fish. So this fish is the one that we're looking at. The focal fish pays attention first to all the fish in the zone of repulsion, which is the first zone. So he's got to be sure that fish will be sure not to crash into those other fish. It next pays attention to the zone of alignment, shown in a lighter red, and the last to the zone of attraction. The shape of these zones is dependent upon the animal's sensory capabilities. In the model on the right, the topographical distance model, the focal fish pays attention only to 6 or 7 of the closest fish, regardless of their distance. So we're going to be talking about fish shoals and fish schools as an example of swarms. Fish shoals are any group of fish, including mixed species of fish. A school is a closely knit group of same species swimming in a tightly synchronized manner. Shoaling is helpful in predator detection, dilution of chances of capture of any one individual in the shoal, and increases the chances of finding a mate. It is also probable that the swarming of fish increases the hydrodynamic efficiency of the of the school. Some schools consist of several billion fish. So some species of fish which move in schools include the tuna, the sturgeon, the blue striped snapper, herrings, anchovy, Atlantic cod, jacks, mullets, tuna, and sharks. So this is an individual, easy to spot, but try that. When in aggregate, there are many eyes to detect a predator. The behavior demonstrated in the slide is called predator avoidance. In addition to spotting potential predators, the masses of fish confuse the predator's ability to pick out a single target because of sensory overload. The aggregate of fish operate almost as a single organism, somehow acting absent any leader. Individual fish responses only to nearby fish to respond in a similar fashion. So each fish pays attention only to a small number of fish near it. There is safety in numbers, especially in vast numbers. It is difficult for us even to select one individual if we were to be spearfishing. However, huge numbers can be attractive to predators, endangering the swarm even while protecting the individuals. Each year, billions of sardines swarm off the coast of South Africa. One time a satellite caught a picture of the swarm, and the image was thought to be a huge oil slick. The swarm creates a feeding frenzy along the coastline, consisting of sea and air animals gorging themselves on this traveling buffet. Researchers estimate the total weight of the sardine run off of South Africa equals East Africa's wildebeest migration. This migration is called the sardine run. A bait ball occurs when fish clump together in a ball as a last-ditch effort by schooling fish in the face of predators. Sardine bait balls can be up to 65 feet in diameter and last for over 10 minutes. The bait ball derives its name from bait, from the fact that the ball itself becomes like bait for predators both in the skies and the sea, as well as for humans. Fish which employ this strategy usually live in open, exposed water, which offers no cover, such as reefs and rocks. Predators have evolved strategies which use the strength of the bait ball for such attacks, strategies as lunge feeding, aerial dives from birds, and corralling and bubble net feeding by predator fish such as the orca, the thresher shark, dolphins, and porpoises. Bubble net feeding is a swarm strategy by these animals and in which the schooling fish's fear of bubbles is exploited by creating a virtual net of bubbles around the bait ball. This forces the fish to clump together, making a wonderful humpback equivalent of a meal at Red Lobster. But one day evolution will offer this survival mechanism for little fishies in a swarm. Organize. Monarch butterfly migration swarms. The monarch butterfly is famous for its beauty. However, that coloring signals a dark side of this flying work of art. Monarch butterflies are poisonous, and the color signals to the predators that information. The butterfly gets its poison from eating poisonous milkweeds in their larval stage. The animals which eat butterflies get very sick, but usually do not die. They, however, will not dine again on this species of butterfly. But monarchs are famous for another reason. Every year, they migrate by the hundreds of thousands. During our summer months, the butterflies swarm and begin a 3,000-mile migration. Coming as far away from Canada, they fly to coastal and southern California and the transvolcanic mountains of Mexico. The migration takes 4 generations of monarchs. How do the monarchs navigate? They use the sun, and they also have a magnetic compass system in their brain. The monarch migration has been called one of the most spectacular natural phenomena in the world. Imagine up to 500,000 monarchs taken to the skies, going to where they know not, and for reasons they cannot comprehend. And since the migration is a multi-generational trip, no single butterfly will make it to the end while going either to or fro. The swarms seem to harbor information as to the time of departure and the route, yet not one of the individuals in the swarm has that information. Not all species of monarchs migrate, and of those which do, not all embark on this massive 4-generational trip. Where do those which do engage on such a trip go to roost in the winter? They go to specific areas in Mexico, Lighthouse Point in Florida. They go to California and Arizona and some other locations. These overwintering sites provide similar environments, stable and non-frost weather, trees, humidity, and access to drinking water. Does any one butterfly look for these conditions? Certainly not. The swarm has this information, and as such, the swarm acts as one massive brain. And that is what it looks like when they get to Mexico and swarm on a tree. Bat swarms. Bats are the only mammals capable of true and sustained flight. They may be even better than in maneuverability than most birds. Some bats are tiny, with wingspans of only 5 inches, and others are enormous, with wingspans of almost 6 feet. I personally would not like to see one of those. There are over 1,200 species and comprise about 20% of all classified mammal species in the world. Some species eat insects and others eat fruit. And let's not forget, there are also bats that eat neither insects nor fruit. They prefer blood. Most bats are nocturnal and live in dark places such as caves and sewers. Most navigate by echolocation, but not all do. Bats provide insect reduction services, and their excretion, called guano, is used as fertilizer. And bats are also a reservoir of all kinds of pathogens. Bat swarming occurs within the fall season in many temperate zones. Swarming season is influenced by altitude and latitude of the assemblage. The swarm is mostly male-based, with 4-to-1 ratio of males to females. Studies suggest that females from multiple colonies attend a variety of the male-dominated assemblages to engage in hanky-panky, often after a shared martini. This mixing of bats from several colonies assures genetic variety. Tagging of individual bats by scientists who are bat crazy has demonstrated that the females will generally return to the same sites over the years to mate. Stalling murmurations. Starlings are extremely social birds, and their swarms consist of a million individuals. The European starling is a little more than a common blackbird. It has been estimated that there are more than 200 million starlings just in North America. The entire population of starlings started in the early 1890s when a group of 100 birds were imported from Europe and set loose in New York's Central Park. Starling swarms can consist of hundreds of thousands of individuals engaging in a murmurations of starlings. Their rapid turns in a collective are called synchronistic behavior. In 2013, a mechanical and aerospace engineer collaborated with a physicist in Italy to study just how this synchronicity is accomplished. A mathematical model was constructed, and one of the mathematical conclusions was that an individual bird keeps track of only 7 of its closely closest neighboring bird. And there's no planning to any of these forms. There's no coordination. It's just one bird paying attention to 7 birds around it. By paying attention to only 7 of its neighbors and adjusting flight patterns as the 7 do, amazing configurations are created and then changed almost instantly. Each bird is concerned with only 3 aspects of their flight and the flight of the 7 closest neighbors. The attraction zone, the zone in which an individual moves toward another individual. The repulsion zone, the zone in which an individual avoids other individuals so as to minimize chances for collision. And the angular alignment, attention to the directions in which the neighbors are going. Army ants. There are as many as 200 species of army ants, but the most broad division is between the New World and the Old World species. Individual ants are behaviorally unsophisticated and dumb. Collectively, however, they can perform very sophisticated and complex tasks absent any direction from a central ant. And that's a soldier ant. And this gives you an idea. Here is a worker ant, and here's another one, and these are the soldier ants. Very impressive. Worker army ants know how to address these formidable soldier ants. They call them sir, as in, yes, sir, no, sir, or as you wish, sir. The bottom right is a worker ant, and the soldier ant is many times the size. Now, these jaws, once they close, they can stay closed. So what happens in many indigenous societies where there are army ants is the jaws of an army ant are used to suture cuts in the skin. So they put the army ant, pull the skin together, put the army ant soldier uses its pincers and pulls the skin together, and then they bite the head off, and it stays that way until the wound is healed. When army ants march, nothing will stop them. In this picture, we see the ants create a raft for crossing water. So this is a form of problem solving that the swarm does. The ants at the bottom will sacrifice their lives so the ants on top can make it across the water. The act of creating a raft is not directed by any one ant or even a committee of ants. It's a function of swarm intelligence. Army ants use their bodies to create bridges. In this picture, the ants are shown locking their jaws around other parts of other ants to bridge a gap in the path. So that if there's a gap, that does not stop them. And here it is in nature. The ants which make the bridge hold their position as long as it takes for the column to walk over the linked bodies. Which ant initiated the construction of this living bridge? In a decentralized, self-organizing system, no individual ant is a decider. It is the intelligence of the swarm which directs the actions. Not one ant has information as to what they are doing. You can just ask one ant and see what he says. Army ants are vicious when they are marching and foraging. The colony consumes 500,000 prey, animals and insects, each day. The prey selection varies by species. The movies have depicted foraging army ants as a major threat to human life in their territories. However, their diet generally consists of other ants, insects, frogs, and nesting birds. Army ants go into an attack frenzy when the pheromone trail leads them to a food source. Many indigenous people actually like army ants' invasions of their homes, because after the army ant leave their homes are insect-free. The army ants are better and cheaper than hewlett. The feature they all share, all the army ant shans, is the uniqueness of not creating a permanent nest. Their mass bodies become a living nest called a bivouac. Inside the nest, there are numerous passages which have the collected insect and small animal parts, larvae and eggs, and a queen. Termites. There are about 3,100 species of termites, and all are evolved from cockroaches. Considered one of the most successful groups of insects, they appear on all continents except Antarctica. The queens can live up to 50 years. Like the locust, termites are considered a delicacy in certain human cultures, just not ours. For some people, termites are a valuable source of protein. Several hundred insects are significant pests. Several hundred species are significant pests and can cause damage to buildings, crops, or plantation forest. Termites are divided into soldiers, workers, fertile males, which are kings, and fertile females, which are queens. Their devouring of dead wood and plant matter are considered an ecological importance. Only reproductive termites have wings. They're used only briefly. The swarming is dedicated to one purpose, mating. Proportionate to the size of the builders, termite mounds are the largest structures on Earth. You can see that mound compared to a giraffe and consider how tiny a termite is. Termites are a swarm, display amazing acts of communal intelligence. For example, when soldier termites locate a food source, they communicate with other soldiers. Large numbers of workers appear, and the number of soldier termites diminishes. Termites also engage in war against other termite colonies. This war results in territory either being gained or lost. But the best example of non-directed aggregate behavior is shown in this slide. It is the mound. These mounds are proportionally the tallest skyscrapers in the world. The tallest mound recorded was 40 feet tall, found in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Locusts. Locusts are related to and look like grasshoppers. They're usually solitary insects with lifestyles similar to their cousins. When locusts swarm, it's a devastation to agriculture and therefore to humans dependent upon that agriculture, which often leads to famine and starvation. They are most destructive in Africa. The desert locusts inhabit 60 countries and cover 1/5 of the Earth's landmass. Desert locust plagues threaten 1/10 of the world's population. Although they were usually solitary, they go through a phase called a gregarious phase. According to National Geographic, when there is heavy rains, locusts can congregate into thick, ravenous swarms of tens of millions. A swarm can be 460 square miles. And as each locust can eat its weight in one day, a swarm of that size could consume an estimated 423 million pounds of plants each day. When plant food runs out, the locusts turn cannibalistic. Swarms like this can travel great distances. In 1988, a swarm went from West Africa to the Caribbean. It's just one more thing to be afraid of. There are 19 species of penguins, most living in the Arctic region of the world. Penguins can be found in every continent of the southern hemisphere, with the exception of the Galapagos penguins, which live in the tropical islands at the equator. Penguins are flightless birds. They spend 80% of their lives in water, where they're excellent swimmers, able to achieve speeds of up to 15 miles an hour. Depending upon the species, their weight ranges from 2 to 80 pounds. They range in height from 15 inches to 3.5 feet. Shown here is an emperor penguin. Penguins are monogamous. Penguins typically have no fear of humans. Penguins live in colonies. It is rare to find a sole penguin, and when that happens, it's usually due to some unusual circumstance. Colonies range in size from 1,000 members to up to 200,000 members. Colonies serve the purpose of mate finding, collaboration to find food, and predator surveillance. There is no dominant member of the colony. Colonies also serve the purpose of survival during the intensely cold winters. They huddle together to conserve heat. The huddling creates shields against the biting, freezing winter winds. If, however, the penguins on the outer part of the huddle remain in that position, they would eventually freeze to death. The swarm accommodates for that by changing rows so that the penguins in the outer row can eventually get into the inner row. There's also a problem for the penguins on the inside of the huddle. These penguins need to move the outer rows to cool off. These shifting of positions must be timed so that no member of the huddle either freezes to death or dies by overheating. This ingenious cooperative survival strategy is unplanned and non-directed. It is information that the colony swarm has, which no individual member of the colony possesses. And here's a picture of the backs of the outer row of huddling penguins. So these penguins are taking the biting cold wind, and these penguins are enjoying the warmth, and then eventually they have to migrate inside the huddle. Red crabs of Christmas Island. Never heard of Christmas Island? Well, that's because here's Australia and there's Christmas Island. And this is what it looks like. This little guy is a Christmas Island red crab. The red crab is endemic to Christmas Island and a few other small islands in the Pacific. By endemic, we mean native to a particular location. It has been estimated that there were 43.7 million crabs on Christmas Island. But due to an invasion of yellow crazy ants, which attack crabs, there's been a reported loss of between 10 to 15 million crabs. There is now a concerted effort and largely successful program by Australia, which owns the island, to eradicate the ants. The crabs winter in the ground, in the forest. Around October, November, the wet season in that part of the world, the crabs migrate to the coast to breed. The actual timing of the migration is additionally linked to the phases of the moon. This migration takes about a week. Eggs are released by the female timed precisely at the turn of the high tide during the last quarter of the moon. The enormous numbers of crabs is thought to be due to the elimination of rats, which feasted on them and limited their population. During the migration, they must cross several roads, leading to the loss of crab life by auto-crushing. Sometimes the interaction of a car and a crab leads to car crashes, and their exoskeletons can actually puncture the tire of a car. Residents of Christmas Island have installed tunnels under the road or bridges over them to minimize the danger to both populations, crabs and people. In this picture, you can see an aluminum barrier used to funnel the migrating crabs to safe crossings. This is like my worst nightmare. Shared migrations, wildebeest and zebras. And there's the wildebeest and the zebra. The Great Migration consists of 2 million wildebeest, 200,000 zebras, and other animals transiting the plains of the Serengeti in Southeast Africa. It is the largest overland migration in the world. While there is the appearance of chaos, research has shown that this is an example of swarm intelligence, where animals systematically explore and overcome obstacles, as like this one. The movement is non-directed since there is no leader. The swarm includes wildebeest, and zebras. These unrelated species work well together because they eat different parts of the grass. Zebras eating the top and the wildebeest consuming the shorter grass. Additionally, they support each other because the wildebeest have superior hearing and the zebras have better eyesight. And together with their huge numbers, they cooperate against the predators to form a formidable defense strategy, a strategy which no single individual negotiated. The giant Japanese hornet. The giant Japanese hornet is a subspecies of the Asian giant hornet. They can be extremely aggressive when bothered because they're very territorial, so don't bother them. This is the world's largest hornet. It is native to temperate and tropical East and South Asia and parts of Russia, the Russian Far East. It was found recently in the Pacific Northeast of North America in late 2019. Scientists have captured several individuals and placed miniature tracking devices in the hope of locating and destroying their nest. These insects can be up to 2 inches long. They attack honeybee hives and have been known to fatally attack humans. These predators kill between 40 and 50 humans annually in Japan, but it's determined by the Washington state officials, where they were spotted, that the threat to humans is actually very low. The swarm works to kill honeybees by sending a scout to locate the beehives. That scout leaves a scent trail, and a swarm of about 30 to 50 Japanese hornets return and kill up to 30,000 honeybees in an hour by decapitating them. They take their bodies and the larvae back to the hive to feed their young. Now here's an amazing example of swarm intelligence, and that is the Japanese honeybee swarm has developed a defensive strategy to deal with their giant enemies. They create a bee ball which engulfs the scout bee as the scout enters the hive. The honeybees then beat their wings to build up heat with their kinetic energy. The heat they generate reaches 117 degrees Fahrenheit, while the Japanese hornet can only withstand 115 degrees Fahrenheit, a difference of only 2 degrees. They essentially cook the scout to death. But European and American honeybees have no defensive strategy at all. And speaking of honeybees represent a small portion of the 20,000 known species of bees. There are 8 species and 43 subspecies of honeybees. The honeybee colony is able to engage in swarm decision-making. Individual bees scout for nectar sources and communicate its assessment of the most profitable find by a sort of a dance. The individual does not compare nectar sources, but the hive makes a decision collectively. This is known by computer simulations of nectar source selection. Bees also work together to survive a storm. When a storm is detected, they begin to behave like a single superorganism. They flatten the swarm and create wind passages, all without centralized leadership. Shown in the slide is a swarm of bees exhibiting colony fission. The new queen bee leaves the hive with about 10,000 bees to find a new home. They form a temporary location made exclusively of bee bodies. There is no external architecture. A small number of bees grasp the other bee bodies. And as the bees can die from heat exposure or hypothermia, they work collectively to create a constant core temperature. The bees construct hives with tessellated 6-sided tubes. This design requires less wax and can hold more honey. Their crowding together maintains a temperature of about 30 to 40 degrees Celsius. This is the range of temperature required to control the texture of the wax. The hexagonal tubes are used to store honey, nectar, and pollen. They also house the larva. Look at that design. For us to make a design like that, an architectural structure like that, we would need all kinds of plans. If this were a human structure, there would have been a great deal of architectural renderings. In the hive construction, there are no such renderings or even planning. The result of their individual and undirected behavior is the emergence of this product. So, human applications of nature swarm intelligence. How complex is this field? I mentioned to you that I had trouble pulling together how to do a presentation on something so complex. This will give you an idea of how complex this is. So these are models of swarm behavior, human applications. So they're boids, self-propelled particles, smart dust, ant colony optimization, particle swarm optimization, artificial swarm intelligence, human swarming, bee colony optimization, swarm prediction, search and rescue bots, intent-based routing, swarm robotics, crowd simulation, and ant-based routing. Ant-based routing is what companies like Amazon use to maximize and optimize their routing services, taking their lead from how ants do that. So here are some examples of animal swarm intelligence. Domain astronomy, watching astronomical phenomena through robotic telescopes on several sites around the world. When those observations are coordinated, the result is a functional single telescope, which would be the swarm intelligence. Swarm robotics. Swarms of tiny flying robots swarm in a given opening, such as a cave or collapsed buildings. A computer records their collisions with solid surfacing, resulting in thousands of dots on the computer screen, mapping out the shape of that space. This technology is used in search and rescue operations, for instance, when a building collapses or a mudslide covers a building. Military drone swarm. Thousands of micro drones released to attack. It's estimated that 30 nations are actively developing swarm technology, drone swarm technology. Traffic regulations for autonomous vehicles. A swarm of self-driving cars could engage in self-directing navigation, which could eliminate traffic jams. So ants go into and out of their ant hive, and bees of their ant nest, and bees go in and out of their hives without any kind of a traffic jam. How do they do that? And we learn how they do that. We can apply that to human traffic. Business applications, distribution of cargo, division of tasks, and organization of people. Medical research. By making medical researches and connecting medical papers, a given medical problem can be studied through the principles of decentralized research efforts in a self-organizing manner. Relative information is pulled from around the planet. Irrelevant information is culled and may be used at a separate time. We saw this in the creation of the COVID vaccines. It was happening all over the world, and it was being coordinated in this manner. Workforce efficiency. Using the principles of animal swarming, new models of arranging workers in production factory has created a 30% increase in efficiency. Building designs. Termite mound design has informed both ancient and modern architects how to build houses with passive cooling and ventilation. Using termite solar chimneys and lateral vents, buildings in desert environments can be cooled absent electrical cooling systems. Ant colony optimization algorithms. Learning how blind ants find the shortest path, SP, to food sources. The industry applies the ant colony algorithm to its route construction to find the most efficient delivery decisions. This applies to telecommunication networks, delivery routing and scheduling, etc. Voting. When all sorts of variables disrupt the swarm intelligence aspect of voting, yet if we did not have the electoral college, voting would replicate many of the principles of collective cognitive intelligence. The task is for tens of millions of individuals acting alone to make selections of a very limited choices, be those choices between candidates or referendum items. The final selection is made by the collection of those individual choices to make a set of single decisions. So we talked about autonomous vehicles. The act of communicating only with local other vehicles leads to the emergence of apparent intelligent global behavior. Each car communicates with nearby cars to coordinate the most efficient traffic pattern. And you can see in the picture, the circle around the cars, they're communicating with only those cars around there to make sure that the traffic flows and there's no collisions. Each car communicates with nearby cars to coordinate the most efficient traffic pattern. In Europe, the collective cognitive robot project will result in artificial intelligence being able to replicate the way ants, acting independently, create a swarm response only by communicating with ants in the immediate vicinity. And here's an example of swarm enabling units. And so each of these little robots communicate with only ones around there, and they can take a algorithm and perform an action. And notice this word marabunta over here. Marabunta on the bottom right of the text box. That word is another term for army ants. These mini robots use algorithms developed to explain the cooperative behavior of our army ants. Kilobot robots. This is a kilo of robots cooperating. Kilobots are extremely simple robots, each only a few centimeters across. Instead of one highly complex robot, a kilo of robots collaborate, providing a simple platform for highly complex behaviors. Once an initial command is given, the mass of kilobots self-organize, and self-correct to fulfill the command. For example, when an experimental kilobot system was given the command to create a starfish pattern, no further direction was needed. The individual kilobots self-organized to create that pattern. So here's a robotic swarm with individuals communicating only with close-by individuals to complete a complex task. And we're only at the beginning of what swarm intelligence can provide for humans. And here's an example of how a critical function of insects can be replicated by robots. So the tiny flying robot bees are being built to pollinate crops. As our bee populations decline, an alternate method of pollination was designed, and it's called robotic bees. Called robotic bees, these autonomous insect micro-robots are powered by 6 tiny solar cells. They weigh half the weight of a paperclip and achieve flight by wings that flap at a rate of 17 times per second. They will prove useful in crop pollination, search and rescue missions, weather and climate and environmental monitoring. Modifications will allow for swimming underwater. The summary description states that autonomous micro-aerial vehicles capable of self-contained, self-directed flight and of achieving coordinated behavior in a large group. The basic design was inspired by the biology of a fruit fly and or a bee. Dutch scientists say they can create swarms of these robots to do the work of insects in case of an insect apocalypse, which is what we're seeing now from pesticide. So consider this. If this was an in-person presentation, people would swarm to the exits when the presentation is over. So consider this. There will be no centralized person directing the exit behavior. Each person will make independent decisions as how fast to walk and in what direction. People will self-organize by adjusting their speed of exit according to the movements of those in the immediate proximity. Most likely, a person will attend to 7 or fewer individuals. Each person will have a zone of attractiveness, that is, movement toward others, and a zone of repulsion, movement away from others so as to avoid collision. The result will be an orderly but non-directed exit. The members of the audience will therefore be participants in swarm intelligence. Who would have thunk? And I thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very, very much. I'm going to allow participants now to unmute themselves. So does anyone have a question or comments? Gloria, go ahead.
I entered about 15 minutes ago. I asked for this presentation, Geoff, and thank you. But who would know that you scheduled it? My granddaughter's baby shower. I have a 3rd grade grandchild on the way, and I just got back and I'm in my daughter's house in Davie.
We're having a problem with your microphone, Gloria.
My original question was,
Gloria?
how do the birds swarm in formation? If you could answer that for me, Geoff, I would appreciate it. Did he hear me?
Yes. So Geoff, the question was, how do
I
birds
guess
form
maybe it's 'cause I'm
informations?
in a different location. You can't hear me?
Yeah, we can.
I'm in a different location. I don't understand why.
Yeah, you have a problem with your,
All right, if you
yeah.
heard my question,
Yep.
Sharon,
Okay, Gloria.
can you
Let Geoff
ask
answer.
it?
Go ahead, Geoff.
What? I don't know I didn't
Oh,
understand.
the question was, how do birds migrate from one location to another?
Flying.
No, he can't hear me.
That's the whole thing about swarm intelligence. The swarm itself has the intelligence as to how to navigate, when to navigate, and where to find water and everything. But the individual birds don't have that intelligence.
No, form. Form.
How do they, I don't know what Gloria, type it into the chat window, please.
It's a formation act.
The formation of how did the swarm make that formation pattern?
I'm sorry. I am in somebody else's house.
Gloria, type it into the chat window because your microphone is not working at all.
How did they form? Oh, okay. I could do that.
Gloria, I'm sorry, we cannot hear you at all. Okay, somebody else have a question? How do they form the formation of so many birds? We got it, Gloria.
Well, that's part of what was being studied. How exactly does that happen?
I'm not talking.
How is
I'm not
movement?
talking.
Gloria, you're going to have to mute yourself because we're having trouble. Okay. Go ahead, Geoff.
I'm saying that they studied how that happens. We look at it and find it to be amazing. We don't think of it as a miracle.
All right, I can do that.
Because just like the members of the temple, we all assume that there's a natural explanation for what seems to be miraculous behavior, how they can all turn at the same time. And that happens through a mathematical algorithm in which the birds act in a certain way, responding to only a few members that are right around them. And not just the birds, but fish do the exact same thing. And that's what they were studying, how that happens.
Andy, go ahead.
So I don't think Rabbi Barry's here, so I'll play the role of clergy or whatever you want to call it. But given that we are humans, we have to respect the individual. We have to provide proper nourishment, proper education, and I'll cut to the chase. So the vitality of the individual yields the ability of the swarm to function effectively. So we have to, for example, let's take Flint, Michigan, with the poisoning of the water and the damaging of the children. So as a society, we have to take safeguards to protect these individual lives, because on the macro scale, i.e. swarm, the swarm cannot function effectively if we are depraved as individuals. And what happened in Washington 10, 12 days ago is an example of things going awry.
That's true, but I want you to think about the fact that the study of swarm behavior has been applied to the study of mobs and mobs of people and how they move and how they behave. The mob itself behaves differently than the individuals that are in the mob. They become just the units, but the mob itself has its own sort of intelligence. And one of the things that I found to be interesting is, consider this. You're in a mall and you're walking along and somebody goes running out of the mall, and you look at that and say, what's wrong with that person? What's happening? Two people come running out and say, what's going on? But if 5 or 6 people, it reaches what's called the tipping point. And at that particular point, all the people in the mall begin running too, having no idea of why they're running, what they're escaping. What are you showing us? Oh, the tipping point. Here you go. That's where I got that from. Yes. So that it's a function of how a mob operates at a certain point, that individual behavior and individual decision-making ceases, and the mob itself becomes the unit that's operating.
No, I totally get that. But it's kind of like mechanization or whatever. If the individual part is flawed, the entire entity cannot function however it's possibly can function. So that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, I would say to you that if you have a whole bunch of dysfunctional individuals like we had in the Capitol, that is an example of mob behavior. They still operate with the same kind of principles as a mob. It's just for a different goal.
There was a question from one of our guests today. Do you see any swarm behavior in our frantic search for vaccinations? Are we following leaderless crowds?
Well, I see swarm behavior operating in terms of the creation of the vaccines. It happened at an amazing rate. And of course, we had technology that allowed for that. But the ability to instantly communicate findings around the world allows the entire planet to operate as a single brain, a global brain, as it were, to find a solution to the problems, or hopefully find solution to problem.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Just want to say.
Go ahead, Elaine.
Yes.
Go ahead, Elaine.
Thank you. It was a very interesting program, and I learned a lot from this. I love animals of all kinds, fish, bugs, and everything. So this was very nice, and thank you very much.
I would like to suggest to everybody that if you have any interest in this or want to learn more, it's a very complex field, but there's all kinds of YouTube videos explaining animal intelligence and its applications. So that's it's very interesting to see that. TED presentations, etc.
Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, just real quickly, and I'm sure Geoff, first of all, bravo, phenomenal presentation, just mind-blowing. You really did your homework, the gold standard. I'm going to have to ask Sharon, I want to get the link for this. My girlfriend wanted to watch it, but she's got another obligation. But what I wanted to share was with everybody, there's a scientist, A.O. Wilson, who studies insects and in particular ants. And he's like the world authority on that. And as a small child, he poked his eye out somehow. So he's a one-eyed scientist, but he's persevered and he's still managed to, become this amazing scientist. A.O. Wilson. So I'm sure you heard of that guy, right, Geoff?
No, I don't know that name, but there are many scientists who study this, many. And
well,
so
his specialty is ants and termites.
And I watched a video just prior to this, and that man's specialty, he spent 30 years studying bees. So there are people who approach it from all out, and then there are people who approach it from a computer technology. And they look at this and they say, how can I apply this to to computers or to the human experience? Because there seems to be some kind of a wisdom that an animal swarm is able to evolve that humans could learn from. One of the things in one of the presentations on YouTube was, they're talking about predicting winners in the Kentucky Derby, and they used 3 models. One was an individual, one was a group voting of non-experts, just a whole bunch of people, and one was a group of non-experts using swarm technology. The swarm decision-making as to the Kentucky Derby, which horses will come in, was almost twice as effective as the individual who was studying the facts. So, swarm intelligence has a lot of promise for solving a lot of issues.
Well, I'll throw a little humor into the formula here. So on Friday night, I was singing at another synagogue up in Delray, and I was traveling from South Broward. So as you might imagine, if I'm traveling at, 5 o'clock in the evening, it might be crowded on the highway. So the minute that I notice the traffic is piling up, my anti-swarm behavior says, get off the highway and go an alternate route.
Yes, but here's the thing, is that if you had autonomous vehicles on that highway, you wouldn't have that situation, because what would happen is it would automatically begin to redirect people and without anybody making a decision. And you would also have a standardization of behavior in terms of the operation of the vehicles. So one person slows down, and that is like a domino effect all the way back behind that one person. But an autonomous vehicle, one vehicle is not going to slow down.
Amazing. And now, my last question, I guess, for right now is, what is your career? What did you do to focus on all this?
I was a special educator and a school administrator, and I taught. Because I was a special educator, I was allowed to veer away from the curriculum. So I did, because I found that much of the curriculum, I was teaching history, much of it was so boring that I was bored, and I'm a history buff. I was so bored. So I was covering a class teaching about the Civil War, and I just couldn't believe how boring it was. So I created my first of these presentations. There's 36 of them. It's called Mine Odysseys. And it was the technology of the Civil War, not what generals. It's called the First Modern War, the American Civil War. And the Civil War is considered the first modern war. So I took a completely different way of approaching it. When I was teaching the Middle Ages, I was not, my students weren't that interested in feudalism, but they were interested in castles and how castles were designed to protect the people inside and how the enemy were able to take a castle. That was more interesting to them. And that's how it all got started.
Fantastic. So I'll interject something real quick about this as well. I'm sure you're all familiar with that film. What's that about the three or four women that worked for NASA, the black women?
Yeah. Yes.
What was it called?
The space project. Can't remember the
Something
name of the movie.
Hines?
Yeah, they were mathematicians and yep.
So anyway, my point being is Hidden Figures. That's right. Hidden Figures.
That's it.
So my point being is the same reason they did not integrate baseball for civil rights. They integrated baseball because the players were better players. So if the so-called white racists are interested in a better product or a better game or getting to the moon or the best intelligence, you wouldn't limit yourself to the white guys. You would limit yourself to the pool of smart guys or gals. And so we can make racism obsolete if we could say, hey guys, are you interested in what's best or just being in charge? But then again, I'm trying to fight human nature. So sorry about that.
You're excused. Go sit in the corner.
So I want to thank everybody for their, Hannah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to thank Geoff very much and just tell you that I am always fascinated when I watch the birds and, and I watch them all the time, how they curve and how they turn as one bird. And I have always said there's somebody in that swarm that's got to be the smartest bird to take them all in the direction they're going. So basically, I think that's what you're saying is there's a connection with a major bird that's actually taking the swarm in the direction they're supposed to be going, because they turn so beautifully without anybody, not one touches the other. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, let me just correct you on something. The very nature of that, it's called murmuration, is that there is no bird making decisions.
Oh.
There is no central bird. So the question is, how does it happen? And that's where a mechanical engineer and a physicist studied it and tried to figure out how this was happening, because it's a beautiful example of the swarm acting as one brain. And don't forget, we have billions of neurons, and each neuron acts independently, but collectively we have a brain that can think and make decisions. And that is what the swarm is.
Okay.
A brain, a super brain.
Okay. I got it now.
So I want to thank everybody for participating. I want to thank Geoff Kashdan for this wonderful and very, very interesting and enlightening presentation. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Geoff has many presentations in his Mind Odysseys, and we're probably going to see a little bit more of him, maybe once a month, maybe once every other month, whatever he's willing to give us. And each of them is totally different, totally unique. And he did our past presentation for us, and now he did the swarm intelligence. It's just wonderful. So I applaud you, Geoff. Thank you very much. Kudos to you. Thank you again for your time and all the work that you did on this presentation. We really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.